Hardy Bearing is one of the first sacred seals introduced in the game and is one of the few seals that doesn't have an A, B, or C skill counterpart. This makes Hardy Bearing a really unique skill and is probably one of the least talked about sacred seals, especially compared to more popular options like Distant Defense. In this video, we will discuss what Hardy Bearing does and how you can utilize it in battle. Hardy Bearing is not that complicated of a skill once you understand what it's saying. First off, it disables any skills that change a unit's attack priority, and this is referring to the unit you give Hardy Bearing to. Its second part also disables attack priority changing skills, except this is for the enemy. Basically, no one in the 1v1 battle will be able to use these skills. Keep in mind, Hardy Bearing has 3 tiers to it, and the first and second tiers have a 100% and 50% HP threshold for it to take effect. We will discuss if it's worth upgrading Hardy Bearing to its 3rd tier by using Sacred Coins a little later. So what exactly is an attack priority changing skill, you may ask? At the time of this video, this was referring only to Vantage and Desperation, both which are powerful B skills. Vantage allows a unit to attack first if they are initiated on, and that is changing the attack priority of the fight. Desperation allows a unit to make their follow-up attack before the enemy gets to counterattack, and that is also changing the attack priority. Hardy Bearing is meant to negate these effects and thus can be quite a powerful skill. I would like to point out that breaker type skills do not change attack priority or the attack order. They simply prevent follow-ups from the enemy and grants the user a guaranteed follow-up, but the order of attacks are not switched in any way. Knowing Hardy Bearing cancels out Vantage and Desperation, make sure you do not use these skills on a unit who uses Hardy Bearing. Remember that it does cancel it out for the user as well. Also, another tip is to not use Hardy Bearing with Fire Sweep weapons. They already cancel out Vantage by preventing counterattacks, and they can't attack when enemies initiate, so Desperation won't be interrupted anyway. Now let's talk about some unit types that can use Hardy Bearing to its fullest. First up, I think this is a great skill for mages who have high attack and are not fast enough to use Desperation. Units like Sanaki, Lilina, Delthea, or Julia can dish out some decent damage to low res units. One problem is that they are kind of squishy on the defensive side, and Distant Counter is an incredibly popular skill. Combined with Vantage, these types of mages may find it hard to secure kills if they cannot survive the Vantage proc from physical damaging enemies. With Hardy Bearing, Vantage can be ignored entirely, and they can then clean up low health targets. Other types of units are Brave Weapon users who don't care about quad attacking, or Life and Death users who may have ridiculously high attack, but become really susceptible to getting one-shot. Both of these types of units are good offensively, and with Hardy Bearing, they won't have to worry about getting hit by Vantage or even Vantage plus charge specials. Simply put, good candidates should have high damage, hopefully enough to finish off low health enemies. You can place Hardy Bearing on a unit who can act as your sweeper, or a unit who can clean up what's left of a battle in progress. After blows have been traded, if you have an enemy with Vantage up, having a unit who can negate that skill is incredibly useful. Desperation is less scary to deal with, and on the player phase, you shouldn't have issues initiating on them to take them out. Here are some example units that I have used Hardy Bearing on myself. Micaiah is a good user because she has Donnie, which is effective against both cavalry and armor units. This is a huge amount of extra damage against those type of units, and they are incredibly common to see in the arena. Micaiah comes with Sacrifice, which may put her on low health, but she can heal an ally back up to full health if they need to fight multiple times. This brings some utility to the team, and Micaiah herself can fight against mages thanks to her ridiculously high resistance stat. Adding Hardy Bearing, this grants Micaiah safety against Vantage, and Distant Counter plus Vantage armor units are quite popular to run into. She can fill a variety of roles and doesn't sacrifice much by using Hardy Bearing. Another example is Deirdre, whose Divine Nagatome is effective against dragons. Now this is amazing for the current arena meta. Dragons have become really popular, and you really do need some way to deal with them. Deirdre seems like a really good answer, however the refined breath skills, Lightning Breath in particular, are very much an issue for her since they target her much lower defensive stat. With Vantage included, this means Deirdre needs to be careful to not get one-shotted herself. Give her Hardy Bearing and this problem goes away. I'm not going to say Hardy Bearing is a must-have seal, but you can see that it is a decent answer to common problems you run into in the arena. Hardy Bearing can actually be useful if you plan to use it with these other types of skills. Out-of-combat damage skills like Poison Strike, Savage Blow, and Jafar's Deadly Dagger or the Pain Plus Staff all synergize well if you bring along a Hardy Bearing user. If I send in my Jafar, he can destroy enemy teams if they stand too close, and with all that splash damage, it becomes super viable to just one-shot the rest of the units. As mentioned before, if you run with a squishy team, then they themselves can get one-shot if the enemy is running Vantage. With Hardy Bearing, you can have a unit who can ignore any sort of Vantage procs, and with enemies on low HP, you can easily set them up to clean up a whole team. I would also like to mention Area of Effect specials, and this time you want Hardy Bearing on the same unit. If you did not know, the attack from these types of specials deal auto combat damage first, and thus this can trigger Vantage in combat. It's sort of an unfortunate situation, but things have changed a lot since Hardy Bearing was first introduced, and if you have found a way to use aerial effect specials, then maybe consider upgrading Hardy Bearing as well. Speaking of upgrading, is it worth the sacred coins? First off, upgrading to tier 3 gets rid of the health requirement, and this means Hardy Bearing is always active. This makes a huge difference because you won't always have the perfect battle, and units may need to fight multiple times while taking damage. With tier 3 Hardy Bearing, you can freely use that unit to combat other threats until you need them to take out a target with Vantage. To me personally, you use Hardy Bearing as an insurance so that when you run into a situation where the enemy has Vantage and can take out all your other units, you still have a way to deal with it. If I'm taking this skill purely for this one specific situation, you bet that I always want it to work. It feels really good to save a deathless arena match because you had a unit with Hardy Bearing. There are of course many ways to deal with Vantage, but for the sake of building different teams, having Hardy Bearing as an option is very nice. If you plan to use it, then I fully recommend upgrading it to its 3rd tier. Overall, Hardy Bearing is not a flashy skill. You never see anyone talking about it, and there are a ton of other good Sacred Seal options you can choose from. It's a skill that does its job well, and I would have to say that for quite a while now, it brings a lot of value to any Arena team. Arena is plagued with distant counter abilities and refined Lightning Breath dragons. With Vantage, these units are tough to take down, and sometimes a battle doesn't always go the way you want, and you may end up taking more damage from another fight. If you struggle with these types of situations, then consider finding a spot for Hardy Bearing on your team. That's it for this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Do you have any other tips for using Hardy Bearing? Leave them in the comments to help everyone else out. On a side note, I know I don't celebrate it very often, but we recently passed 7,000 subscribers and I couldn't be happier. Thanks for taking the time to watch my videos, and I hope I can continue putting out interesting content for you guys to watch. I'll see you guys in the next video.